Hello, welcome to this lecture. We want to look at fundamental issues in research by first looking at the basic concepts, what they are and how they apply in research. Welcome. In this lecture, we want to attempt to understand what is meant by research, what is meant by research problem, what is meant by research objectives, research questions, research hypothesis, population, sample, and sampling. Let's begin with research. What exactly is research? Research can be understood to mean a process of systematic inquiry that involves a number of activities. These activities include data collection, information documentation, data analysis and interpretation, and presentation of findings. But I need to add that even before data collection, there is the activity of conceptualization of the research concept. That is where you come up with the issue that you want to study, the objectives that will be used, the methodology, among other things. That one comes much earlier before data collection. I also wish to add that at the end of the research, upon presenting your findings, and they are generally accepted by the academic community in your respective field, you also require as a researcher to share your findings with other researchers or scholars around the world. And this is done through a number of ways, but the most recognized way is publication of your findings in the refereed journals. So that one can also be considered as an important aspect of research. We now want to understand why research is important in society. First, we appreciate research because it helps us in inculcating scientific and deductive thinking, which promotes logical thinking and organization. We're required, when we're doing research, to observe all scientific principles, requirements, and procedures, and in doing so, we develop a culture of ensuring that we think scientifically, not traditionally. But above all, we're also required to argue out our case and ensure that whatever we do is supported by evidence, so that the conclusions that we arrive at is heavily supported by evidence and it leaves no doubt for guesswork. Therefore, one of the most fundamental importance of research is that it inculcates scientific and deductive thinking. Number two, research also helps in solving operational and planning problems in businesses and industries. Quite often, businesses and industries undertake research to understand a lot of issues affecting them. For instance, work behavior, how their products are performing in the market, and also the strategies that they can employ effectively to ensure that they gain competitive advantage. Back in the businesses, organizations also use research to understand certain organizational processes. For instance, how workers can be motivated, how conflicts in the businesses or in the organizations can be reduced or managed, and how the competence and skills of workers can be enhanced. All these are possible when we have solid evidence that shows that indeed these are problems that are afflicting these organizations and industries, and through that, interventions can be done which are informed by research findings. That makes, therefore, research an important thing for businesses and industries. The third importance of research is that it provides a basis for government, economic, social, and political decisions, as well as policies. Government undertake research many times, and through such researches, they are able to understand the economic needs and policies that are working and those that are working, but they're also able to understand the various needs of citizens, and through that, they're able to come up with interventions, either in terms of policies, in terms of laws, and in terms of certain reforms that they consider will adequately address the concerns of citizens. One of the most important researches that governments do is the census, which in functional states, it is done after every 10 years. Through the census, governments are able to understand a lot of issues affecting their populations, and it is through that they're able to develop both short-term and long-term plans of addressing those particular issues. Census should not just be understood merely as an exercise of establishing how many people live in a country, but it goes beyond that to also understand whether government services are adequate, whether they are relevant, and also to estimate what kind of government services might be required in future. Therefore, census is one of the areas, is one of the researches that governments do. Therefore, governments rely heavily on research, both at policy level and those that are carried out by academicians to effect certain changes, create reforms, and provide an atmosphere that enhances the well-being of its citizens. Another important area where research is significant is that research aids in providing answers or solutions to social problems. Indeed, society has many problems, ranging from violence or other conflicts, marital and other forms of relationships, quite many, crime, corruption, among others. These problems can be better be understood through research. Research, therefore, goes further to look at these issues deeply and come up with suggestions that, if implemented, can help in a great deal in trying to resolve those particular problems. Therefore, we can say that research is an important area that is not only important in enabling society understands the problems it's facing, but can also be used as a means of providing answers or solutions to those particular. We now want to turn to what makes a particular research good, that is, qualities of a good research. One, a good research is systematic, that is, it must follow defined procedures and sequence. Every discipline has certain procedures that have been developed over the years by scholars and authorities in those particular fields. These procedures helps in guiding researchers, and therefore a good research should be that follow the laid down procedures, because each procedure provides a base upon which the next procedure, the next activity in research relies on. Therefore, a good research is judged by the extent to which it follows the defined procedures and sequences as provided by scholars and authorities within that particular field. The other important quality of research is that a good research is logical. That is, it is grounded on logical reasoning and the logical process of induction and deduction. It means that the conclusions that researchers make after research must be those that are supported by adequate evidence through the data that is being collected from the subjects. Such data must be sufficient, must be truthful, and must reflect exactly what is on the ground. And therefore, a good research must flow. That is, the conclusions made must be seen in the context of the evidence that has been provided through data collection. Another important quality of a good research is that a good research is empirical. Empirical means that it is based on real, concrete, and practical situations, which is supported by primary data. It is required of researchers to ensure that all the information they provide is collected from the primary sources. That is to mean research does not permit falsification or exaggeration of data. Data must be collected from the respondents, must be interpreted in the context in which the study intended, and must be those that actually reflect the views of the population upon which the research was carried out. The other quality of research is that a good research is replicable. It means that the findings of a study in a given area can be used to explain similar issues in a different geographical location. That is, there must be an element of uniformity or similarity in terms of findings, and therefore such findings can be used to explain similar phenomena occurring elsewhere. For instance, if a study focused on factors contributing to drug abuse among university students in any given university, it is expected that most students, especially within a given a similar geographical zone, for instance in Kenya, they experience almost generally similar challenges. And therefore, what might make a student get exposed to drug abuse in one university is expected can generally apply to a different student in another university, unless there are now situational or institutional factors that are either enhancing or preventing students from engaging in such practices. Otherwise, the general idea is that populations that are similar, it's expected that the experiences they go through in any given time should be generally uniform, not necessarily the same, but should be generally uniform. And therefore, findings of a study of that population in one particular geographical location could be used to explain the circumstances of a similar population in a different geographical area, as long as both geographical areas share particular common characteristics. We now turn to research problem. First, we need to understand research problem as a specific issue or difficulty, contradiction, or gap in knowledge that needs to be addressed through research. A research problem should not be understood as a difficulty or problems that researchers face when they are undertaking research. No, it should be understood as what informs a particular researcher to engage in a particular study. That is, what is it that a researcher considers as an issue affecting society that not much is known about, and therefore the best way to reveal more information and a better understanding about it is through research. So when we talk of a research problem, therefore, in the context of research, we simply means a condition that researchers feel can be better understood or improved when data is collected, is analyzed, and is presented. For instance, A research problem might be factors contributing to self-directed violence among the law enforcement agencies personnel in Kenya. Of late, we have had cases of police shooting themselves, shooting their colleagues under circumstances that are not clear. And therefore, a researcher might be prompted by, or rather out of concern about the escalating level of violence within the police force, might be concerned, might be prompted to undertake a study about it, just to show or to reveal to society, to reveal to authorities, to reveal to policymakers what exactly is affecting the police force that is probably predisposing its personnel to self-directed violence. Therefore, that now becomes the research problem, because it's a problem because there's a knowledge gap in terms of what is making these people engage in self-directed violence. In short, therefore, we can look at a research problem as an issue that requires systematic investigations and that results in the generation of new knowledge, affirmation, or rejection of existing knowledge. In other words, the end product of the research findings is that whatever researchers have found should either lead to new knowledge or confirm what is already known or reject the popular opinion. That is what's already known. That is the end goal of the research. What then are the characteristics of a good research problem? One, it is researchable. That is, we are able to conceptualize it, we are able to access the respondents, we are able to collect data. That data can be interpreted, and that data can therefore be used to explain what is happening. It is important to observe that not all problems or issues affecting society, or what we consider as knowledge gap, are researchable. Some may not be researchable because of unavailability of the subjects or respondents or the study population. Some might not be researchable because we are not able to comprehend and conceptualize the situation. Others are not researchable merely because they are beyond the ability of the human faculty. And therefore, any research problem that we decide to undertake must be one that is researchable. It's researchable because we are able to comprehend or conceptualize an issue that needs research. Secondly, we are able to develop instruments. Thirdly, we are able to access the population and therefore collect data. And again, we are able to analyze and interpret data that is collected from them. Then lastly, we are able to share our findings with other scholars around the world. Otherwise, any research that cannot permit us to do all that, we say it is not a good problem. It's not a good research problem because it is not researchable. The other important characteristic of a good research problem is that it is definite, clear, and focused. We must have a research problem whose direction is not only definite, but it is clear and it is able to direct our attention to a particular end. For instance, a definite, clear, or focused research problem must be one that we are able to discern independent variable and dependent variable. Secondly, we are able to clearly understand the population of the study. And it's also clear from the research problem where the study will be done. So that if it is not possible for us to know where the study is going to be done, to identify the population of the study, neither are we able to identify the independent and dependent variable from that research problem, then that research problem might not meet this criteria of being definite, being clear, and focused. Number 3, a good research problem is empirical. That is, we are able to collect primary data from the respondents. Any research that is not permitting us, or a research problem that cannot permit us to get factual and concrete information from the primary respondents, we cannot categorize or term that research problem as good. And therefore, being empirical means that we're able to obtain factual, accurate information from the primary sources. If we are unable to do that, then we cannot call that research problem as being good. The other characteristic is that a research problem should be timely. Timely means it should be one that is focusing on issues that are affecting society presently. This is because problems that are current will require researchers for a better understanding, and through those findings, we are able to understand them not only better, but also to understand the possible solutions to those problems. Therefore, it is important that research, a good research, focuses on things that are current. However, I need to point out that an event might have occurred some decades ago. For instance, say in the 1960s, like in Kenya, there are a lot of political assassinations. And to date, not much is known about what happened. And therefore, if an event occurred, say, some decades back, but certain information is emerging now, and a researcher intends to undertake a research to bring new information or new knowledge that was previously unknown about a particular event, despite it having occurred some time back, we can still consider that as current and timely. For instance, if a researcher undertakes a study and reveals new information, say about what killed Tom Mboya in 1969, and that information was previously not known, then we can still call that research timely. So timeliness does not necessarily mean that it is something that is happening now or something that happened most recently. It is simply both time factor as well as new information about previous events, but which was not previously known. That can still qualify as a current and timely research. The other characteristic of a good research problem is that it must be, or it should be, replicable or generalized. I explained this earlier to mean that the findings of a research study in one place, we should be able to use those findings to explain a similar phenomena in a population similar to the one that has been studied elsewhere. I gave earlier the example of drug abuse among university college students in one college. Those findings, we should be in a position to use them to try to understand similar problem in a different college, as long as the population share certain common characteristics and also the two geographical areas share certain common characteristics. Lastly, a good research problem should be one that contributes to body of knowledge. we stated earlier on that one of the goals of research is to generate new knowledge. And therefore, any study, any research that is capable to provide knowledge that builds onto what is already known is a good research. Otherwise, a research cannot be good if its work is merely to repeat what is already known. And therefore, there is no distinction in terms of new knowledge between what it generates and what was previously generated. Where then do we get ideas about issues that we can attack in research? That is the sources of research problem. One is review of existing literature. When we go through existing literature, we are able to understand what has been done and what has not been done. And those issues that have not been done should form the basis of the gap in knowledge. And we may need to undertake a research for purposes of obtaining knowledge or generating new knowledge to fill those gaps. So the review of existing literature is one of the sources of research. The other one is professional interactions. Professionals normally engage individuals, and when professionals interact, they are able to exchange their experiences, and through that, they are able to come up, or we are able to identify issues that not much is known about. For instance, if a professional counselor say receives a lot of patients requiring counseling services on alcohol addiction, and it is an issue that many professional counselors are raising, that they are receiving a lot of patients that are seeking for counseling because of alcohol addiction. And it's a theme that appears to affect a significant number of people. Then we are able now to say, if indeed a significant portion of the population is experiencing alcohol addiction, then we may be interested in understanding why. On that basis, therefore, we may develop our research problem around contributing factors to alcohol addiction in any given population. That way, we are able from our interaction with professionals to get to know the issues that they receive from the population that members of the public seek their services to address, and we are then able to see how well such issues can be understood deeply through research. Another important source of research problem is public forums, barazas, where people attend. Members of the public, for instance, express concerns about issues affecting them in society. For instance, if one attended a chief's baraza or a chief's gathering, and what comes out is that quite a number of young people are engaging in crime, and members of the public have expressed concern to authorities through those public barazas that they have seen an increase in the number of young people engaging in crime, burglary, rape, and other forms of crimes, then we can pick up such information as researchers to develop a research problem around it, so that we are able to undertake a study on what is making young people or the youth engage in criminal activities. Through such public forums, therefore, we are able to get what is often mentioned and how much knowledge the public offers, and if we realize that the concern that has been raised by the public, not much is known about it. We can come in as researchers to develop a research problem around it, so that we undertake a thorough study about it and then present our findings for purposes of helping the society, helping the community, and helping government find a solution to that particular problem. Another important area that can be a source of a research problem is personal experience. What we have gone through as individuals can also challenge us to undertake research on that. For instance, if an individual has made several attempts to abandon alcohol abuse or drug abuse, and even through the intervention of rehabilitation institutions, the individual drinks, promises to stop drinking, but after a few days goes back to drinking. An individual might be intrigued and start asking himself or herself whether he or she is the only one undergoing that experience. Based on that, it is possible for an individual, if he has such knowledge, to take research as a personal journey to understand why some drug addicts who have been rehabilitated relapse, while others remain so, get rehabilitated successfully. Therefore, an individual might want to look at factors affecting relapse among drug and alcohol addicts in a given area. So, what we've experienced as individuals can be a source of motivation for us to undertake research, so that we understand it deeply and also seek the opinion of others, just to have a general understanding of what it is and whether there are differences in terms of what people have experienced and what we've experienced. So personal experience is an important source of research problem. The other source of research problem are the socioeconomic and technological changes that happen in society. For instance, today, the mobile phone or the cell phone technology is prevalent. Associated with this are various social media platforms. Indeed, quite a lot of relationships, intimate and marital relationships, have been affected negatively by social media such as Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, and others. And therefore, somebody might be interested in understanding how social media is undermining intimate relationships. But even more interesting, another individual might be interested in understanding how social media can be used to strengthen intimate relationship. Even a more interesting study might be to focus on public perception about online dating, because these are things that are now happening technologically, and therefore they're affecting our lives. So a person can be interested in understanding certain aspects about these things. The other issue is media. Media can also be another important source of research problem. An issue that is often mentioned in the media, but which not much information is provided by the media, can form a basis upon which a research is undertaken. So, what is present in the media can be a source of motivation for researchers to think and deeply understand the issues that the media mentions, but which the media does not provide deeper information or more information about it. Let's now turn to research objectives. What exactly are research objectives? Research objectives are understood as what the researcher wants to achieve from the research. we normally formulate research objectives from the research problem. So first, we have to get the research problem. Then from the research problem, we now develop our research objectives. Research objectives are basically the specific actions that a researcher intends to take in order to understand the research problem. In other words, you take certain narrow paths that leads you to the destination of the problem or the goals that you intended to achieve in your research problem. So those specific steps, those specific research activities that you want to investigate in order for you as a researcher to understand what the problem that you're investigating is, they're the ones that we call the research objectives. Their purpose is to help the researcher find answers to the research problem. Research objectives exist in two forms. We have what we call general objective and we have what we call specific objectives. General objectives are those that states what is expected to be achieved by the study in general terms. In other words, it is the reformulation of the research problem in an objective way. For instance, if our research problem was or is factors contributing to suicide ideation among university students in Kenya. Assuming that is our research problem, then our research objective, general objective, would read that the general objective of this study is to examine factors contributing to suicide ideation among university students in Kenya. In other words, a general objective is simply a reformulation of a research problem in an objective way. Then, of course, we have specific objectives. Specific objectives are now the ones that addresses various aspects of the problems defined under the statement of the problem and also under the larger problems. They are those that are assumed to influence or cause the problems that a researcher intends to investigate. Basically, they specify what and where the study will be done. For instance, if you go by the example of suicide ideation that I've given, a researcher might think, for instance, or assume that one of the factors leading to suicide ideation probably is academic pressure, another one probably is financial constraints, another one could be relationship strain. And therefore, the specific objectives would be formulated around the three, that is, academic pressure, financial constraints, and relationship strains. Those are the specific issues that then a researcher would pursue in order for that researcher to deeply and adequately understand what leads to suicide ideation among the students. This is not to say that what the researcher proposes might be the only one. No, there could be other factors. But for the purposes of that study, the researcher decides to focus only on those three particular areas. Indeed, not all research objectives are good, and that is why we are concerned about the qualities of good research objectives. One, they must be relevant. That is, they must speak to the research problem. Secondly, they must be clearly stated variables. The variables here are the independent and dependent variables. it should be clear to the researcher or to the reader to clearly see from the objectives what the independent variable is and what the dependent variable is. In each objective, that must be there. The other one is it must be measurable. That is, the issues that a researcher intends to investigate must be those that can be comprehended, must be those that the researcher can measure, must be those that the researcher can report either in a narrative form or in a statistical or numerical form. Otherwise, if that's not possible, then those objectives might not be good. The last one, they must employ the words, rather the verb, the right verb, that is to, so that we talk of to investigate this, to examine this, to assess this, to analyze this, to determine this, to establish this, and so on. So that must be there as another quality of the good research objectives. Studies also have what we call research questions. Research questions are basically generated from the problems that require further research. That is, the focus of research questions are basically from the specific objectives. In other words, research questions are basically specific objectives stated in a question form. Therefore, if a study has 3 specific objectives, it's expected of that study to have 3 research questions, so that research question 1 should correspond with specific objective 1, research question 2 with specific objective 2, research question 3 with specific objective 3, and so on and so forth. That uniformity is important. We have hypothesis, also an important element and an important concept in research. And we understand hypothesis as as a specific or clear and testable proposition or a statement about the possible outcome of a given study. Sorry, we will have hypotheses in our next presentation slide. As for now, we stop there.